Florida State's status with the ACC. What does this mean for the future of college football? Because I think you've mentioned several times the ACC is trying its hardest to hold things together while teams like Florida State and Clemson look elsewhere. So what do we got on FSU now? Because I'll tell you what, when the ACC breaks up, you're going to have what I believe will be the next big realignment and will be the last big realignment. And no matter how strong and ironclad that contract is, I think it'll be broke eventually, but I'm not sure you see it that way, Caleb.
So I think if it could have been broken, it will, and they haven't been able to get the schools to do it. And so here's what I think is happening. Florida State, the Board of Trustees called a meeting today, and it's to discuss one thing: the legal avenues to leave the ACC. Here's what I think's happening, Dave. I think Florida State is taking the biggest Hail Mary risk that has ever been taken in college athletics, which is this. They're going to leave the ACC, they're going to accept the penalties, and they're going to take the risk that they'll be off the hook for those penalties because once they leave, enough other ACC schools will leave to dissolve the conference. They were quoted as saying, "We hope that they hope this is a quote ripple effect." And here, that is the biggest Hail Mary I have ever seen to try to leave a conference. And here's a second Hail Mary. They're doing it without an offer from the SEC and the Big Ten. And it's debatable if the SEC is interested in adding Florida State. A lot of people don't think they are. And the Big Ten, it's debatable if they want Florida State because the Big Ten is still trying to stick with that whole AAU affiliation. So I think they'd rather have Miami if they were in the Florida market than Florida State. So Florida State is the biggest Hail Mary. I mean, guys, this is the biggest Hail Mary in the history of sports. For a school, by the way, that did not do a Hail Mary 30 years ago, they took the safe route and went to the ACC to avoid having to compete in the SEC. So what do you think is going to happen, Dave? Do you think when Florida State leaves the ACC, it will create a ripple effect? Or is Florida State going to just be, or are they just screwed?
When the ACC disbands, I think that the SEC would gobble up a Florida State and Clemson. I still believe that. Now, you don't necessarily believe that, right?
I did until about a week ago, and I've read some stories now that apparently report the SEC is not interested. And I'm also reading, and it's not just South Carolina and Florida that would block Florida State and Clemson. I've heard that Alabama doesn't want Florida State because the Alabama recruits the Florida Panhandle so well. They don't want Florida State in the SEC. And I've heard Georgia recruits the Florida Panhandle. They don't want Florida State in the SEC.
Yeah, and here's the thing that Florida State and all its fans that are whining and crying need to remember: it's a TV show. Your quarterback got hurt. You weren't the most compelling TV show, and I'm sorry to Mike Norvell who doesn't understand that, and so many Florida State fans that don't. Somebody came up to me at the gym the other day and said, "Well, why didn't they just tell them on the front end that they couldn't get in if they went undefeated?" Well, because then you wouldn't have had the TV show throughout the season. So you had the TV show throughout the season, and then you had an incredible ending to it. And the incredible ending was compelling. Florida State getting left out undefeated, that's compelling.
It's compelling. And by the way,
it may not be fair, but we've talked more Florida State than we ever did. And the simple fact is they're not one of the four best teams. Derek said at the end of the day, I'm glad FSU ain't in it. And I am too.
I would have left them out even if Jordan Travis was there. I don't care if they win undefeated with Jordan Travis. I think a one-loss Alabama and a one-loss Texas have a better resume than Florida State. And y'all can hate me all day for that. And if you got a problem with that,
I don't think anybody hates you. Unless you got like 4 or 5 people behind your camera. I think everybody agrees with you.
and if y'all got a problem with that, Florida State, you should have joined the SEC when you were asked to in 1990. Okay? This is solely your fault. You ran from competition. Cowardice has consequences. Okay? And Florida State chose cowardice. So on the long run, so you think, Dave, here's the question, because here's the thing. Florida State leaving the ACC, if they do this Hail Mary, the only way that they get out of the grant of rights deal is if 7 or 8 other ACC schools follow suit and do the same thing and then dissolve the conference.
Right, which they tried to put that group together before. And that group didn't come together. It took like 3/4 of the conference?
Yeah, they were being strong. They need just a majority, but they couldn't get a simple majority. So Florida State, here's what I think is happening. Florida State knows if they leave the ACC, they wreck the conference financially. So I think by voting to leave, then a bunch of other schools will they're taking the risk that a bunch of other schools who were on the fence about leaving will just like that jump it up and leave. Like maybe a Georgia Tech who's not that valuable of a program, but can't survive without the money Florida State's bringing into the ACC right now. I think that might happen.
Let me tell you why I think Florida State is crowing so much. Okay. And I think there's a very specific reason. I think they're thinking about the future. When it comes to your future, be sure you get Don Self involved if you're in the greater Chattanooga area. He's your State Farm agent, 423-396-2126, 423-396-2126, donself.net. Customer service still matters. For over 40 years, that's been the case. Everybody wants to save money, but what happens when you put that claim in? donself.net, right below, donself.net. Support our sponsors. It's why we're here. I think Florida State has a little bit of a short man syndrome right now. And I think that they're not worried so much as getting left out of this playoff. What happens if what you're saying is true and the SEC doesn't want them and they're out of the ACC, they don't get in the SEC, and then suddenly you look at it from the perspective of, do we get in that mega conference that you and I were talking about yesterday that's 36 teams? Or do you look at the state of Florida and you go, you've got the state school in Florida. They're in the SEC. They're getting in. You've got Miami, which based off a TV market, and I think that should be secondary, but it's not to some people. And if you put together this mega conference, there are going to be people with seats at the table. They're going to say TV market matters. So you got Miami and the Hurricanes, even though they don't take football nearly as seriously as Florida State. Could Florida State get left out of a mega conference? Is that outside the realm of possibility?
Dave, that is an amazing point you just made, and I didn't even think about it until you brought it up. Yes, because here's what's happening. The mega conference that you talk about, this is going to move really fast, isn't it? When it happens, it's going to move really, really fast. The college football playoff contract for 12 teams only runs through 2025, meaning this mega conference is probably forming in 2026 immediately. Florida State, because for me personally, I thought, why are they leaving? Because with the 12-team playoff, the ACC is going to get an auto bid every year, aren't they? Like, you could just beat up on the ACC because you got 6 conference champions get auto bids. ACC is going to be one of the top 6. So I'm thinking, why are they leaving now? It just didn't make sense. And then I thought, oh, they know that this mega conference is forming in a couple of years. They see the writing on the wall, and they are willing to throw the Hail Mary to get out now to try to get into that mega conference.
That's why they talked about boycotting the bowl. Go for it. Because if I'm one of those decision makers that's going to be at that table putting together a mega conference in maybe 18 months, then you boycott a bowl. Oh, you're not a part of my mega conference. I'm sorry. That's the ultimate flipping your nose at the system. And I think the same, Derek brought it up. I think the same about Notre Dame too. You better be careful where you tread, Notre Dame, because some people are going to get left out. And I think that we think they're going to be the Oregon States and Washington States of the world, which you could make the argument that they should be left out. There's going to be one school that you're going to be surprised that gets left out, be it a Notre Dame or Florida State or somebody like that. Better be really careful.
My money's on Clemson. I think Clemson gets left out because I think Clemson is about to kind of fall as a program. They had a lucky run in the 2010s that I don't think is sustainable. And I think the interest in Clemson is going to fade by the time
well, here's the other thing, too, is much like Florida is going to throw a fit for Florida State to ever get in the SEC, and they did in 92. Ultimately, Florida State got the invitation, but Florida threw a fit, and they should. South Carolina is going to throw a fit, and they've got an in with the SEC. And do we think that Clemson's going to be good forever? No, they could be a one-coach type of school with Dabo Swinney. I mean, there are schools that have had good runs because they had great coaches coming up. Kentucky, Paul Bear Bryant. That they're not going to be great every year because they're them. They were great because they had a great coach. So, yeah, I could see Clemson falling off the map as well.
Long-term plan, North Carolina and Virginia are more valuable than Clemson as programs for either conference.